Good afternoon. Yeah? Okay, cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. If I stand here, I can even see the room. That's very nice. Welcome and thank you for coming to this presentation this afternoon on comparing PostgreSQL. Very difficult name if you do it for the first time, then you trip over the SQL at the end. Comparing PostgreSQL to Oracle. Thank you for the organization for having me here at the Riga Dev Days. And just let's get going because I have a number of things I want to share with you this afternoon. And this is basically the short agenda that I'm going through. It's not that interesting. If there are any questions in the meanwhile, please just interrupt me. The more interactive we can make this, the more fun it'll be, I hope. Who am I for the people that don't know me? I've been doing IT for a couple of years already. I started out being a database administrator and did a lot of things afterwards, which were more or less related to that. And I ended up doing, well, evangelism for all kinds of things. And one of the fun things I like to do is emphasize DBA dev, which is having developers, which is actually fun because this is a developer conference, working together with DBAs. I think we saw some presentations during this stream where there was a comparison between devs who would like to do all this shiny new stuff in production and DBAs and ops people who like to keep everything as stable as they can because it's also way too scary to do new things in production. And I think there could be a good synergy to do these things together. Enough about that. What about you? Are there any database administrators in the room this afternoon? Cool. A few. Developers. A lot. Well, that makes sense, obviously. Who of you are managers? Cool. System architects or architects in any other way? Okay, so we've got a nice mix of audience. Or who of you just walked in thinking, okay, this is the afternoon, let's see what happens? Cool. Obviously you, yes. In this database scheme or in this architectural scheme, who of you work with Oracle? Cool. Who of you work with Microsoft? Okay, cool. MySQL? LampStack, yeah. Postgres? Cool. So there are a couple of you who already know a little bit what's going on. Are you using hybrid environments? Okay, good. Just to make a little bit of a backdrop to this topic, the many shiny colors of the, well, operations environment. Does anybody need to know more about Oracle? Does anybody not know Oracle? Sorry? You can always know more, but in the database realm, I think most people do already, right? Yeah. A little bit about Postgres, a little bit about EDB. EDB is the largest contributing company to Postgres. Postgres is an open source database, is maintained by over 30,000 people contributing to this database development, but EDB is in the lucky position to be able to support the biggest piece in the core development of Postgres. And we also deliver support to this database. I don't want to spend too much time because it's not that interesting. What happens is Postgres is very innovative. It's an open source database, so you're able to have a lot of things available in the database, and the things that are not available in the database are things that you can add yourself. It's open. Well, I don't have to explain to you because this is a developer conference. I've heard numerous talks about open source software, so that's not one of the things I'm going to spend too much time on. What you find if you work with open source software, though, is that, well, people who work with Linux have experienced that obviously a lot already, is if something goes wrong, then, well, you're actually on your own because it's open source and you can ask a question on the forum or whatever, but it doesn't really help you solve your problem. This is one of the things that EDB adds to Postgres. But again, this is just to make Postgres usable for the bigger implementations out there. A little bit of a disclaimer. When I talk about Oracle, and I've heard this before in this room, in the Oracle track room, I'm talking about Oracle Enterprise Edition. Oh, sorry? It's not open source, but there is also Oracle Standard Edition, and that changes the game a little bit, and it changed the game even more about 6 months ago, before Oracle Standard Edition 2 was the only thing that you get out, which you could get except of Enterprise Edition. And when I say PostgreSQL, I actually mean EDB Postgres Advanced Server. More on these small details further on. Sometimes in this presentation I will focus a little bit more on PostgreSQL and a little bit less on Oracle, because I have assumed that most of you know more about Oracle than you know about PostgreSQL. If that's not the case, then please shout and we can zoom in. One of the interesting graphs out there is the database ranking engine graph, and it more or less discusses which are the most used databases out there. I must admit, in the lower ranks I clicked out a few because it was like a whole lot more here in the bottom, but I left in the most important ones. One of the funny things we see is that there is actually some movement in the top here. And for me, one of the more funny things is development. But it's all relatively new still. One of the trends we see is that PostgreSQL is in an uprise, which is, I think, a good thing for obvious reasons, obviously. Okay. Is this going to be a real deep dive talk? No, not really. We're going pool deep, skinny dipping. I want to take these two bits of technology and just make them one-on-one compared. I'm going through a number of key pieces inside the technology and just briefly put them side by side. Besides differences between Oracle and PostgreSQL, there are an extremely lot synonyms. You would say these are two things that live in two different worlds. You've got Oracle here in the enterprise sphere, you've got Postgres, open source, perhaps hobby still. Well, not really. These are a few of the things that, if you look at them, are actually fairly the same. And the difference are not as big as you would think in the beginning. For the general capabilities of the databases, they are both built on the same research that was done like 40 years ago by IBM, where they created the model for the relational database. These are all object relational databases. Both Oracle and Postgres are. They adhere to these ACID and MCVV standards, meaning all transactions are autonomous, they don't interfere with one another. And they have this multi-version concurrency control, meaning that whatever you do, it will not affect other transactions, and it will make sure that there is read consistency when you operate your database. Very important things for a relational database if you want to use it for financial systems, for instance, and things that the other databases like Mongo do not share in this respect. Archive logging, transactional logging, obviously is also one of the things of importance here. One of the strange things that happened is that somewhere in the process people have come to a situation where they thought, well, let's have different names for the same objects. So in Oracle, a table is called a table, and a table in PostgreSQL is called a relation. This is not so very much a problem, because if you start reading documentation, a lot of times these real titles are as well used. So the crossout is not so very big. Rows, tuples, data, columns, attributes, a lot of things you can read that for yourself. Capabilities. Both Oracle and PostgreSQL have an unlimited database size. You have an unlimited number of rows per table. You can even have an unlimited amount of indexes per table. Even though you could, that's not always a very good idea to do this. Would you want to have like 1,000 indexes on a table? Just the fact that you can shouldn't really mean that you also should do it. Table sizes, 32 gigs. You can do quite a lot with that. 4 terabytes of row versus 1.6. I don't know, what's the biggest row size you have in your database? I would doubt that anybody has a row with 1.6 terabytes of space in it. And so for the other sizes as well. Presentation will be available, and these facts you can just review on your own later. Tables and partitions, if you look at this, zoom in a little bit. Things like temporary tables, materialized views between Oracle and PostgreSQL actually are just the same. So the things you could expect of an Oracle database more or less work the same in a Postgres database. Same goes for partitioning. A number of partitioning algorithms are available. IoT, mind you, this is a big O in the middle. So it's not Internet of Things, it's index organized tables. Work similar. Unfortunately, there is no interval partition or partitioned indexes within PostgreSQL at this moment.
What about reference partition?
Not yet. This is one of the things where there is discussion about. It's not planned really for any specific version of PostgreSQL, but there is talk to, okay, we've seen this as an important thing and we're going to work on it. It was interesting because it was actually a discussion recently. Well, okay, this is, sorry, a little bit of a joke. I know in the Oracle realm there are a lot of people who would like to have a Boolean data type. PostgreSQL has one, but obviously that's a joke. If you look at integers, more or less comparable. We've got a few more on the, I say we, as I'm a little bit biased in this setting obviously. We have a few more. Floating points, decimal, again, a lot of similarities and a few differences. Datetime, obviously, same between both databases. Row ID, this makes application compatibility obviously a lot easier. XML type, One of the more interesting differences for using a object relational database in big data projects is the ability to have native JSON stored inside the database. Oracle solves this by having a feature set check constraints to work with JSON data types. PostgreSQL does this natively. And obviously spatial is available in both, with the small remark that spatial within PostgreSQL is more robust, just because of the simple reason that people that wanted to work with spatial functionality, so maps and differences between where different things are geographically located, just found it easier to develop it themselves and be able to add it to an open source database in this respect. SQL capabilities. Well, you can see there are a whole lot of application building blocks, fairly the same between both technologies. Union, intersect, well, you can read them for yourself. And one of the interesting things is that PostgreSQL is able to do transactional DDL. Transactional DDL is the ability to create tables, change columns, or whatever from within a statement running inside the database. This is within a SQL select, for instance. Unfortunately, I don't have an example included, but this way you can change or alter tables with a SQL select. Could be very useful in some situations. SQL extensions. Well, the very well-known dual table, decode, row num, etc., all work the same if you compare Oracle to PostgreSQL. Well, this was starting to be a long, boring table, but we're about halfway through now, so bear with me for a little while. Technologies to make sure your database is highly available, that you can rely on the technology. If you look at something like point-in-time recovery, where you have a database, you make continuous backups and want to make sure that you can restore to the same situation you had, but then 30 minutes ago. These are both similarly supported within Oracle as in PostgreSQL. Backup and recovery tooling. Oracle obviously has RMAN. Everyone who has worked with an Oracle database will have touched RMAN at some point. PostgreSQL comes with BART, backup and recovery tool. The thing had to have a name, so we chose this one. Standby database, active data guard versus synchronous replication, both technologies that will create a second database which is more or less up to speed with your production environment. And lastly, flashback database is something which is supported within Oracle. Who has actively used flashback? Cool. Well, that's one thing PostgreSQL can't help you with at this time. What you could do is create a standby database and let it lag your production database by an X amount of time, so you could query that standby database to do your flashback in that fashion. Very interesting thing to look at is performance and scalability. And I'm going to zoom in on this in the next slide or so a bit further. PostgreSQL is based on a shared nothing architecture. This means that every database cluster, as it's called within the technology, is autonomous. It is not able to share memory structures, disk structures between databases. Where in Oracle you have a shared everything architecture. And this architecture makes sure that Well, it enables you to have a solution like a real application cluster, for instance, where you are able to share memory functions and share transaction streams between database instances and create, in that respect, a scalable and more high available solution. Obviously, there are in the PostgreSQL technology also solutions to do this, but they're a bit different. Connection pooling. Connection pooling is one thing. If we zoom in one of the next few slides on how to create this high availability, this bit of connection pooling is something you need to keep in back of your mind. But they're similar in both technologies. If you look at in-memory technologies, who has heard of or worked with in-memory? Okay, cool. In-memory is a columnar representation in memory of your database. It's more or less transparent. That's actually very cool technology from Oracle. Within PostgreSQL, there is a technology. It's basically a fork of PostgreSQL that also has this columnar store, which you can just reference via a so-called connector. And multi-master replication within the Oracle stream, within the Oracle realm. You have a couple of third-party products that do this for you. It is natively embedded within Oracle, within PostgreSQL. Comparing these things make me mixed up. Security. Coupling your databases to the various enterprise directories that are out there are equally the same over both technologies, obviously. There is a very big list with, we're not going to read them here, they'll be in the slide. Whitelisting is something which is not supported within Oracle. It is not you're not able to create, well, there could be ways with your SQLnet.com file to create something where you say, okay, this IP list is not allowed, this IP list is allowed. This is something which is much more easily done in PostgreSQL. One thing PostgreSQL does not have is Audit Vault. Who has heard of Audit Vault? Okay, cool. These are all products out of the Enterprise Edition stack. One of the final topics here, integration. Integration meaning data integration from various databases or various sources. Things like database links and transaction log shipping are the same or similar between Oracle and PostgreSQL. Session-based synchronous replication, where you can say, okay, I've got this one session which is very important, and every transaction which is done in this session can't be given or can't be flagged as being successful after it's at least being confirmed by one or more slaves. This is something which you can only do within PostgreSQL. Can be useful in some highly important environments. And integration with various big data environments. PostgreSQL supports all of them except Sybase at this point in time. I haven't found any connectors that could do this. Application development, PL/SQL. There was a discussion a while back among pure Postgres users. They're saying, oh, I want to move my Oracle workload to PostgreSQL, but there are no PL/SQL functionality, there is no PL/SQL packages, etc. When using EnterpriseDB tooling, there is. And one of the other advantages from the already pure open source Postgres is the ability to use a wealth of extra programming languages, including R included in the database, which is well, could be very advantageous. Entities, same and similar. So there are a lot of things also in this respect the same between both databases. We had a super talk by Alex just about previous to this one. Unfortunately, Apex does not run on PostgreSQL. Sorry, it's big data and structured data, spatial key value stores. A lot of things are there or are even better. XML storage, unfortunately. Compression, not within the database. It is possible, but in the OS we trust. I'll get to that in a little bit. And Hadoop, MongoDB, Cubes, integration with that is also available in both techniques. And finally, we're getting to the end of the list. Management, so the ability to load large amounts of data very quickly. Oracle has SQL Loader, we have EDB Loader. Again, the thing had to have a name. Also, a management console is available in both. What I've already said, point-in-time recovery, diagnostic tuning, profiler, more or less the same in both technologies. And finally, automatic memory management and storage. Again, for PostgreSQL in the OS we trust. I talked about open versus closed before a little bit. Oracle is so-called closed source. It is built by a company which has just the gain to build a product and to sell it and make money and be a company where that's a good thing, but it brings certain things with it. If you look at open source development, it is done by you. And you do it because you are solving a real day-to-day business problem. And I thought just to highlight this, as it is an essential difference between closed and open source application development. I have been a closed source person for a very long time and made the switch to open source because I finally started to see that this could actually be a better solution. The shared nothing, shared everything, I promised I would get back to that. This is a little bit what it means. Okay, in shared everything, all the resources around the database instance are shared between various instances of the database. In this way, you can create a multi-instance database. In the shared nothing architecture, everything has its own set of resources. And this has an impact on scalability, obviously. The other thing I promised to come back to briefly was integrated or separate. That's Oracle. They have created their own environment and they're saying, okay, I'm going to start my own OS within the machine, more or less. And this is going to be something that is from me, and I own this, and I'm going to control everything that is talking to my database. It also enables you to have this shared everything architecture. On the other hand, PostgreSQL is completely integrated into the server where it's living. So it depends on the server to control disk access, to control memory access. And all these I/O paths are controlled by the environment where it lives in. So it's much more in sync with the world it lives in. I thought these would be nice pictures to quickly demonstrate that. And if you then look at a solution like Real Application Cluster, for instance, you see a lot of shared components here, which are in the end comprising to build this high availability architecture. If you compare this to a so-called shared nothing architecture, you have loose pillars. You've got a master database, and you've got various standby databases which live in different geographic environments, and in that way build this high available environment. If the master fails, there are techniques to fail over to a slave database and just continue working. If you combine this with the pooling technology I was talking about a couple of slides back, this takes care that an application which is running against the primary master fails, connection is broken, and fails within a fraction of a couple of seconds over to the promoted standby database. In any case, you lose briefly the connection, but this is true for RAC as well as for in this kind of high availability solutions. But in both cases, you're able to continue working without interruption. Fitting with the slide I just saw, integrated versus open. Oracle has its operating system-like qualities within their own environment. But PostgreSQL integrates into whatever it's given. This is important in that sense that you will have to have good maintenance for your operating system, obviously, to get the most out of the combination of techniques. Having had this technical overview, it is also important to, I think at least it's also important to look at the pricing of these both technologies, as there are some challenges obviously that you, for things that you have to create, you have to manage your operating system, etc., to get an equal performance out of this. For open source not to be alone, it would be good to have some help. There are obviously companies out there that offer this help. EDB is one of them. This pricing is independent of virtualization. It's good to know that if you compare this to Oracle, and that's what we're doing, everybody knows, I think, this picture of this parking garage, where if you want to park the car at one parking spot, you have to pay for all the parking spots because it's no way to say in which parking spot you're going to park. For EDB pricing, it's just looking at the cores that you're actually using, and it's always inclusive of everything. You can review this if you like. What does it bring? Every year there's subscription renewal. We have a couple of various, basically 2 products, and there are some developer license if you would be interested. But more importantly is looking at real pricing. What I've did is take a 4-core machine. They are still there, there's not that much anymore. Take an enterprise edition, take an active data card, actually the things that you would normally use if you want to use a database in a professional environment, and just look what's the difference in the price for that. Well, there is a little bit of difference. And this is for that same 4-core machine. Again, a little bit of this investment difference you're going to need to make sure that everything that you're doing also works within PostgreSQL. Obviously, you have the budgetary and room to do this. Okay, now we've seen all these cool things, and actually I just want to go out and start doing this. What would be a good way to get started on PostgreSQL in this case? When I started doing this, and it is just 3 months ago, coming from an Oracle environment, being used to the Oracle Universal Installer and setting up a database and all these things and working with DataGuard, getting it to work, I thought, this is fairly easy. I am probably missing a few steps here because it's 5 minutes and I had a database and well. Then I start hearing that from others. I started asking around, what are your experience? And they said, well, yeah, come to talk of it. Yeah, it's really that easy. These are steps, they're in the slides, you can use them. They're also to be found on the internet. This is what I personally checked, proved, just for myself. It was approximately 30 seconds to do the first, the first step, which was just install a repository and add an exception to my CentOS base repository in Yum. It was another 5 seconds to run yum install over this to make sure that I had this repository added. Another 15 seconds to install, what was it again? To install Postgres itself. I spent 1 minute editing the profile, so I had my commands. I didn't have to include the path and everything. So I could finally set up the database, and that process took another 30 seconds. All in all, not that very long. Enable the service on Linux, and actually you could just log in to the database. Was 5 minutes altogether, I think, more or less, and you really have a database running. Adding something like high availability, so archive the continuous archive replication to a standby database is just setting up another database and adding 2 files that it also works. If you would like to get started, I've included a couple of URLs. They will be available in the presentation. And there are a lot of good documentation sites out there which discuss every step that you have to take to get this going. My personal experience was good, so I would recommend you all just try it out once and just see for yourself how easy it goes. Coming to the end of everything, just to wrap up what we've seen so far. Oracle has a very solid place in the database ecosystem out there. There's no denying that. They've been around for I don't know how long. There are very good business cases where you say, okay, Oracle is the solution for my business problem. The same is also true for PostgreSQL. It is just a lot less known. There are, I don't know how many Postgres implementations out there. Just because Postgres was defaultly installed on the Gesundheit, on the operating system you were running, and a lot of companies are also using PostgreSQL, but it's not that very visible in the market. I believe if we look at this with an open mind, PostgreSQL could support a lot of more database workloads, support a lot more businesses, freeing up budget to do cool things in different places than IT operations. With this all in mind, with everything that we've seen, I think PostgreSQL is a real alternative to a lot of database implementations that are running in your businesses or in businesses around the world at this point in time. In 80% of the cases. There are always business cases where you say, okay, this is a real Oracle environment. This is where you have to really step up scale or do specific things where you can only solve the problem with Oracle. So the wrap up basically, would it be smart to go out and return to your workplace tomorrow or next week and start playing with PostgreSQL. From my personal experience, and not because I happen to work at a company, yeah, I would say, yeah. Do this, try it out, see if it fits what you need, and just start playing with the material. It's actually fun because it's real technology that you're working with, and in the end, you don't have to do it completely alone. If you need support, there are always people and companies out there that can help you. And that wraps up my talk. Are there any further questions? Sir.
So the first question regarding this, I checked on your website, there is this Oracle compatibility layer.
Yeah.
So how much does it really cover, or how maybe you can describe it in some way, how it's done?
The Oracle compatibility layer, basically what it is, it's roughly two things. One, it is a number of the things that I've just highlighted, a number of tooling that we add on top of PostgreSQL to have this enterprise management console, for instance. The backup and recovery tool is one of the things that fits in that layer, as well as the automatic failover. If you have,
but a bit more simple things like PLSQL, so it's then just implemented in Postgres, or it's?
Yes. In that respect, PLSQL is in pure open source Postgres. One of the things that we add is packages. So you're able to create or reuse Oracle database PLSQL packages within PostgreSQL. One of the other things is a couple of views. So a lot of the $V views, for instance, are also available in PostgreSQL, so you can use the same scripting that you use for your Oracle database with a PostgreSQL database.
And some function translations from Oracle SQL queries would.
Yeah. There is a migration toolkit or an application assessment toolkit where there is a comparison. Okay, we've got this code set running on Oracle. We want to run it on PostgreSQL. How good will this go? How much work do we have to do to get it running? And from the experience we've had over the past 10 years, 80% of all Oracle workload can run one-on-one on PostgreSQL.
Okay.
Recently, I have learned that PostgreSQL supports document store.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so why didn't you put this document store and JSON support in your comparison? Because Oracle, I'm not sure they support document store. They do? Okay.
There are a lot more functionalities out there which run on PostgreSQL, and they are created from within the open source movement and work on the pure open source PostgreSQL. If we would go and highlight them all, we would be here next week, I think.
What about training and certifications? Is there any training body or certification body?
EnterpriseDB as a company has certification and training for PostgreSQL, as well as a couple of other companies. Also online, yeah.
And regarding performance on some bigger data sets, more concurrent users and so on, is there any comparison? There was basically nothing about performance in the comparison.
Very, very good question. What we have seen, and it always takes benchmarking. The problem with benchmarking is that it's very easy to tune benchmarks so that they are always good. So in that respect, it has not very much use to put it up here. What we have seen is that there is a little bit performance lag in PostgreSQL, but this is somewhere between 2 and 5%. To find out an actual measurement, you will have to do a POC or something and just run your workload on a PostgreSQL database and just see for yourself what the differences is. But this is ballpark, 2 to 5%.
Not for me.
So you said that in 80% of the cases you would recommend PostgreSQL. So what are those 20%? Could you give some examples when you wouldn't?
These last 20% are things that are using specific Oracle things or are in such environments that even with a linear scaling on master databases, you're not going to be able to handle the workload. So this is use cases where you would now look at an Exadata cluster, for instance. These are so very specific workloads that it's very hard to find an economical way to get them running on PostgreSQL. A final question?
There was a chart in the beginning of your presentation
Yeah.
With popularity of different databases. So the trend is almost linear. Oracle almost unnoticeably losing popularity, and Postgres quite noticeably, as you said, in the uptrend. There's a saying that one is a bad soldier if he doesn't dream of becoming a general. What is your vision of the future? Will this trend continue linearly, and will Postgres become database engine #1, or you have not that ambitious goal? So how do you see the future?
Our goals are to become obviously database #1. It is this thing out there which is a database is not just judged by its database capabilities, it's also, it has to be part of an ecosystem. There will always be a lot of people continuing using Oracle because they've done so for I don't know how long, and they have applications which run on Oracle. And same is true with Microsoft. If you are a Microsoft-only shop, chances of you saying, okay, I'm going to take this database part and take it out of my portfolio and exchange it by, for instance, Postgres, is not so very big. So our ambition, and that's also what we see happening over the last couple of years, is that the uptake of open source, not just in database, but in general, is starting to grow. So this trend will rise. It will rise for quite a bit, I think. But if we're ever really going to make #1, I'm not that sure. If we can play on top with all these guys, then yeah, it will be good. I have no idea. A number. Comparison number. Yeah. This is, well, found the site. Cool. Then I would like to thank you for your attention this afternoon.